Welcome everyone. We're here today to talk about research data management in Canada from a national perspective, and in particular the perspective of Portage. And for those of you who don't know, Portage is a national library-based research data management network that brings together initiatives in research data management to build capacity and to coordinate our activities better on a national scale. A recent Spark program on the CBC talked about big data, and in particular about big data related to radio collars on caribou in the Yukon. And it wasn't the GPS tracking or the cameras that they were collecting data and all that sort of thing. That technology, they've got that covered. What the researcher in question said the biggest problem is that now that we're getting into massive amounts of data, and the really biggest challenges we have are the data management ones. And so we are moving into a world where big data in science and in social science and in other disciplines is becoming a real issue for researchers. Other drivers in the research data management ecosystem include the tri-agency's emerging policy on research data management, and these include the requirement for an institutional RDM strategy to be posted on a university's website describing how they are going to approach research data management on their campus. The second pillar is the requirement for data management plans, and data management plans will be required before funds will flow on a research project. And the third requirement from this emerging policy will be data deposit in an appropriate archive or repository. In addition to that, there are also trends in journal publishing, trends in open science, there are international initiatives surrounding research data management, and there are certainly best practices emerging and in existence around the world and in Canada on how best to manage your data. The goals of the Portage network address these RDM issues by building a community of practice for research data management, by engaging and advocating for research data management among various stakeholder communities, and facilitating and providing leadership in the development of RDM infrastructure. We're building a community of practice starting with our network of experts, and these would include RDM specialists and librarians on our various campuses. Within our institutions, we are partnering out with liaison librarians, IT specialists, university research offices, ethics boards, and other stakeholders. Ultimately, our goal is to serve researchers, and these can be academic, government, or other. And underpinning all of this will be policies and platforms that will support research data management. So in the context of the tri-agency policy and Portage response to it, we have the DMP Assistant, the Data Management Planning Assistant. We have the Federated Research Data Repository, and we have Dataverse, which is another repository option. All of these have to work in concert for the community of practice to work well. Portage is made up of a network of experts that consists of over 110 people from across the country, many of them working on multiple Portage groups. Experts come from across the country with strong representation from each of our 4 regional library consortia. Portage experts come from over 40 different institutions and or organizations, including both CAAL and non-CAAL libraries and a range of other organizations, including government. In Eastern Canada, the representation is shown here, and Eastern Canada is very well represented. Portage has a number of expert and working groups. The expert groups are data management planning, curation, data discovery, preservation, training, and research intelligence. Working groups are a bit more granular in terms of their focus. We have working groups on Dataverse North, which is looking at a national instance of Dataverse, among other things. The FERDR, Federated Research Data Repository Service Model Working Group. We have a group on the ethical treatment of sensitive data. We have another Discovery Service Working Group related to FERDR. And we have an Institutional Research Data Management Strategies Working Group, looking at that first pillar of the emerging tri-agency policy. All of our efforts are focusing on both practical solutions and effective policy development in the RDM sphere. Stakeholder engagement takes place locally, regionally and provincially, and nationally. Local stakeholders include researchers, IT departments, research services, ethics boards, schools of graduate studies, and a very strong involvement in most cases by the libraries on our campuses. Regional stakeholders include Canada's 4 regional library consortia, COPL, OCL, CAAL, and BCI. And I'm very pleased to say that recently BCI signed a memorandum of understanding to join the other 3 regional consortia as partners with Portage in a formal way. The digital research ecosystem is shown in this graphic, which shows 4 quadrants: support, use, direction, and services. And I've thrown some definitions of acronyms up here because I sometimes find them difficult to remember. CAAL Portage sits firmly in the services quadrant, but at the same time we are involved with stakeholders around this entire ecosystem, including the provinces and the federal departments and agencies, CFI and the tri-agency, researchers, institutions and organizations. We've been involved with the ICED and the LCDRI in terms of an ask to the government for funding. We've been involved with Research Data Canada and CASRE, and finally Compute Canada and Canary. Portage is doing a lot of work providing RDM support and infrastructure. Our Portage webpage is a good landing place to start looking for resources related to RDM in Canada. We have a training tab on our webpage that takes you to a variety of resources, including a couple of really interesting primers. One is a research data management primer on the left, and the other is the Good Enough Research Data Management Tool for busy researchers. And we're very pleased with the response to these. In addition to that, there is a curated list of external training resources provided on our webpage. And this is among many other resources that the various Portage volunteers have worked on in their various committees. In terms of RDM support and infrastructure as it relates back to the tri-agency policy, we have an institutional RDM strategy working group that is has looked at developing a template to help institutions in mapping out this strategy without having to start from a blank slate. So the template as configured currently has 4 major sections, which would be to raise awareness on your campus, to assess institutional readiness, to develop a policy or statement, and defining a roadmap. Each of these steps comes with guidance that helps the institutions and various stakeholders on your campus develop a fulsome and complete strategy in response to the emerging tri-agency policy. Regarding data management plans, we have a data management planning expert group, and that data management planning expert group developed and launched the DMP Assistant back in the fall of 2015. And this is both a tool and a template. The tool is the software underpinning the net web service, and the template is framed around 7 sections, each dealing with specific aspects of research data management. And within each section, there is guidance provided. Finally, we've got infrastructure support in the form of repositories where researchers can deposit their data. And the Portage Federated Research Data Repository and our work with Dataverse North are contributing to this aspect of research data management. We've got 2 major research data repositories that we're dealing with. The one is FURDR, which is a partnership between Portage and Compute Canada. And the main features of the FURDR system are big data upload and download, national discovery platform, a national repository option, and provision of a preservation pipeline through Archivematica. Dataverse, which is managed through Portage by the Dataverse North Working Group, brings together people working with various instances of Dataverse already in existence across the country. And the main features of Dataverse are that it is a mature platform. It is Harvard-based open source software. It is widely adopted. It is user-friendly, and it can be easily branded to your institution. If we look at the federated architecture for research data management and treat the researchers as being distributed across the country, as reflected here by our 4 major library consortia, we can look at the picture in a grander scale. Researchers do research and develop their data, and ultimately that data should find a home in one of several repositories. So there are discipline-specific repositories for some subject areas. There are regional institutional repositories of a more generic nature. There are regional and institutional instances of Dataverse at some of our regions and institutions. In addition to this, Portage has developed, as I said before, in cooperation with Compute Canada, the Federated Research Data Repository, and this handles big data. The limits of many repositories, and take Dataverse for example, in terms of upload and download of files is about 2 gigabytes per file, and many research projects exceed this by orders of magnitude. The Federated Research Data Repository will handle big data in terms of gigabytes and terabytes, and it will just handle that through a software connection called Globus Connect, and it will make that transfer happen. But in addition, it also allows for download of big data, which is another important aspect of providing access to research data. FRDR has, in addition, the feature of metadata harvesting. There are currently 31 key identified repositories from which we have harvested metadata into FRDR to provide a national discovery layer. So there's a one-stop shopping for research data from over 31 repositories across the country. And finally, in FRDR's context, we have a preservation pipeline through Archivematica, which generates archival quality packages for the purposes of long-term storage. If we look at the storage spectrum, because it's a good way of sort of framing this architecture, we have researchers at the bottom there doing research, and it's their research in the life of the project is actually active storage. It's storage that facilitates the actual process of doing research. Subsequently, at the point of deposit, research finds its way into one of several repositories, as I've already described. Ultimately, in a curated way, some research data will find its way into archival storage through what we're describing as a network of preservation storage providers. Another way of looking at this is through a data storage continuum. And in this, we have the active storage, repository storage, and archival storage, with the first, active storage, being a controlled environment, working on a copy for short-term duration of the project, and the goal of that active storage is completing research. Repository storage provides open access to data as appropriate, and not all data can be made open. The purpose of repository storage is dissemination and storage for the medium term beyond the duration of the project, and its goals are discovery and access. Archival storage is open as appropriate again. It is a preservation copy for the long term, and its use case is disaster recovery and a copy of last resort. Looking at examples of each of these, we have active storage in the left column showing institutional network drives where researchers might be conducting research on laboratory computers. Laboratory equipment might have data stored in it, and high-performance computing clusters may be involved as well. And these are just examples. Repository storage would include the discipline-specific repositories, as mentioned before, and it shows in this center column the metadata being harvested into FRDR. And then it shows a preservation pipeline. Now it's showing it out of FRDR, but technically preservation could take place at any one of the repository levels if they chose to develop a pipeline by whatever means to generate archival information packages, or AIPs, for delivery to a preservation service provider. The data storage continuum has other activities that happen in concert, and these would include data management planning, as we've already discussed, and ultimately data curation as well throughout the entire life cycle. Portage has been busy for the past while. We just completed a cross-country 4-city tour with the Tri-Agency and Portage, delivering the message about the emerging policy, but also Portage responses to it. And those were very successful, and the Tri-Agency was quite pleased with our collaboration on that. In the fall of 2017, we were involved in the Portage RDA RDM Day in Montreal. We did 2 DLI training sessions in November and December, one out west and one in Toronto, looking specifically at research data management, and we're grateful to Stats Canada for that opportunity. In December, I delivered a CODATA Canada webinar to that audience, and in December, Portage participated in a Coalition for Networked Information conference in Washington, D.C. In the winter-spring, there are a number of things on tap. The chair of our preservation expert group attended the IDCC conference in Barcelona, Spain. We've had meetings with the Library and Archives Canada and the National Research Council regarding RDM a couple of weeks ago. In March, we'll be attending a CODATA conference and a Research Data Alliance conference in Germany. There's a BCNet conference in Vancouver, and iAssist is coming up in Montreal, and there is a large Portage contingent attending there. There'll be a lot of work on RDM presented. And finally, in June, there's an Atlantic Provinces Library Association meeting. These are just a few of the things that we're working on coming up in the near future. So Portage has been busy, and we've been busy in governance, developing governance. We've been developing platforms and services, as I've discussed here today. We've been involved in quite a bit of outreach, offering workshops and so on data management planning and on the Federated Research Data Repository. And we've been working on agreements, as I mentioned earlier, that recently signed MOU with BCI in Quebec. And that wraps up my presentation for today. Thank you very much for your attention.